Hi, it's Leah Briick. I'm here again for a conversation from the couch. And I've asked Richard Blankenship to join me today because we need some help. I get a lot of calls about therapeutic disclosure, calls, emails, and I thought, what a great topic to discuss in our conversations from the couch because, we need to learn what therapeutic disclosure is and how it's done in a counseling session. So welcome, Richard. I'm so glad that you could join me today in Conversations from the Couch.
Thanks, Leah. It's always great to be here.
So, Richard, tell us a little bit about therapeutic disclosure and what does it really mean when you hear somebody say that? Because not everybody's going to know the jargon that we use in our clinical communities.
You're right, they don't. And therapeutic disclosure is basically it's a structured process of sharing information and trying to help a betrayed partner get the truth so that they know what they're dealing with. It's an opportunity for the person who has been the betrayer to come clean and to be able to address the relational traumas that have come from their betrayal, their acting out. So there's a lot of therapeutic benefit to doing a therapeutic disclosure. The basic reason for that we try to accomplish through it is just sharing the truth. It's sharing the information, because when you're going through betrayal, your imagination is often worse than the truth. And you see or discover one thing, and then the next thing you know, your mind is wondering, well, where else has he been? Where else has she been? What else has happened that I don't know about? And so we do it to share information and also, for the therapeutic benefit of the couple.
I think that's there were a couple of things that you said that I think it leads me down a whole nother rabbit hole. And that's what betrayal is. So maybe a lot of our listeners don't even know why they would need to be in a therapeutic disclosure. You talked a couple of times about betrayal, but why would I even be sitting in a therapeutic disclosure?
Well, the reason that most people would be participating in therapeutic disclosure is because there has been an intimate betrayal. There has been a violation in the relationship that has really cut a partner to the core. It's a very deep wound. And just the whole nature of betrayal and the volatility of the relationship when that betrayal is discovered, that's part of why we really want a guided therapeutic process, because there's so many things that can come up. It can bring up old wounds. The present wounds are hard enough, let alone them triggering other things. And it's just important to have a good, well-guided process to get through that.
So I think what you're saying is that not any therapist can do this, that it really needs to be somebody who's been trained in how to do therapeutic disclosure. I would bet that there's probably a number of different approaches, lots of programs out there or training groups that teach this. So, is that true that you're not going to just want to say, hey, let's do this therapeutic disclosure in my office and I don't know anything about how to do it?
Right. I have found through the years that there actually are very few places that will train therapists in how to conduct a full therapeutic disclosure. It has been kind of given some lip service at trainings through the years where different organizations have mentioned it, put a few guidelines out there, but they don't really dig in and do a full therapeutic disclosure training. We started doing those here about 5 years ago and have trained therapists literally all over the world in how to conduct these. And it's a very delicate process and it takes a lot of training. Even after we have therapists go through a full day of training just on this subject, we still encourage them to be in a supervision or a consultation process for the first several disclosures that they conduct, just because, there's so many things so many nuances, so many things that can go wrong that, it's one of those things we really encourage therapists to get as much training as possible and to seek guidance as they begin doing disclosures.
I'm thinking about, I'm the betrayed partner and I want to know everything that happened. I can imagine that my mind would just be going, just doing flipping into all kinds of different scenarios and, really wanting to know, how did you touch? How did you kiss? What kind of sex did you have? All of those different questions that you're asking and wanting to know every single piece. And I'm guessing that that's not very helpful to the betrayed to be asking and wanting to know everything, but also the clinician's got to know how to guide that question, right?
Absolutely right. Yeah, there are basically 4 different approaches I've found through the years to doing disclosure, and what you just described is one of them. One of the approaches that is out there that you'll find among a number of therapists, and you'll find it a lot in the 12-step community, is there should be no disclosure at all. It's that attitude of what you don't know won't hurt you, and don't reveal anything, or only reveal what you've been caught at. And we find that to be destructive. One, especially if you're dealing with someone who's been keeping secrets. There is an old tradition that says you're only as sick as your secrets. And so encouraging someone with a compulsive sexual behavior disorder to keep secrets is just going to add fuel to the fire. It's also torture to a partner to be asked to sit there and live with, things they don't even know, and their imagination going all over the place. So another approach that is out there is what I call trickle-down disclosure. I think Jennifer Schneider, Deb Corley years ago called it drips and drabs. But this is where someone is disclosing in little bits at a time. And it's like Chinese water torture for the betrayed partner, because they're having to live with, well, when's the next shoe going to drop? What am I going to find out next? And I've seen so many horror stories like that. And it's like every time a little more information comes out, it re-traumatizes the partner again and again and again. The third approach that I've seen is the one, Leah, that you were describing, and that's that you basically just tell everything, vomit it all up, graphic detail and all. And we strongly recommend against that approach because, number one, once you know something, you can't unknow it. And that kind of graphic imagery is going to be imprinted on the brain of the betrayed partner. And once it's there, it's very hard to get rid of that. And it ultimately ends up re-traumatizing the partner whenever that happens. It's typically because of what I call the comparison trap. Most of the time when partners discover this, they may, take the approach of, okay, well, what was it that I was doing wrong, or why was I inadequate? And they're comparing themselves to affair partners or to internet pornography. And what they're comparing themselves to, particularly with pornography, is just airbrushed images and lighting, camera angles, and things that are just anything but reality. And then they end up very disheartened because who can compete with a fantasy? So partners who experience that typically end up regretting it later, and it does as much or more harm to them as it does to the relationship itself. So the approach that we really take here at Capstone is a full therapeutic disclosure is something where we want to get the whole truth out, but we want to do it without the graphic detail. I often tell couples, one of our goals here is we want to do this disclosure in the most therapeutic and least damaging way possible. Because no matter how you slice it, even with the best of preparation, disclosure sessions are a mess. And partners hearing all of this information are going to be devastated, even under the best of circumstances. So, we want to get the truth out, get their needs met for the information, but we also want to do it in a way that's going to minimize any harm that's done to them in the process.
It really makes me think about what are the benefits to doing a therapeutic disclosure and what are the risks for the betrayed and the betrayer, and why should they go through that process?
That's a great question. The reason we do it for couples is that there is a part of them that wants to save their relationship. And, when that happens, the benefits of it are very much like, they're very basic. It's truth and honesty. You're not going to rebuild an intimate connection without truth and honesty, and disclosure is a way to facilitate that. It is a way to work on intimacy development as a couple, because intimacy involves the good, the bad, and the ugly, not just the good. And a lot of times the person with the compulsive sexual behavior is very focused on making themselves look good. They don't want to present a bad image. And so they're afraid to share the dark parts. And yet, as a couple, part of what makes that relationship safe and for intimacy to develop is, the truth, the dark side, the good side, and, you're able to share all of that in a safe relationship. So, another reason why we would do it is disclosure. I've found for couples through the years is kind of a mile marker in the journey. They will often look back and talk about post-disclosure. It's a very significant time. It's a time with a lot of mixed emotions, especially in the wake of a therapeutic disclosure session. But there is, it is a significant point. And we also have research out there that shows that well over 90% of couples who go through the disclosure process 2 years later are very grateful they did, and they identify it as a significant mile marker in their journey.
So you're bringing up a couple of things that are really just pop questions into my head. And the first one is, well, does every relationship end in divorce? Because that's what you would think, that relationship's going to end in divorce or separation, at least of the partners, if you're not talking about married couples. The other is, at what point or how do you help the person who betrayed build empathy into, the feelings that their partner is having? I can imagine that there's all kinds of triggers that happen from, looks or you're on your computer again. Are you looking at pornography? So I can just imagine all those questions after the disclosure of what might be happening. And so how do you build that empathy in? And can you talk about, what happens in the relationship? Does it end?
Well, let me talk about what happens in the relationship first, and then I do want us to talk about empathy some. But what we find is, and I found through the years with couples I work with, most of the relationships make it. Not all of them do. There are some that will end in divorce or separation. And yet the couples that really dig in and take this journey, do the hard work, I find they typically do quite well when I see them years later, and we try to do follow-ups with them. So with that, I think that when a couple is willing to go through a very difficult process in preparing for therapeutic disclosure, it shows they're heavily invested in the relationship. And most of the marriages and relationships I find do continue. So you would think it would be just the opposite, like you were describing. And I find it's anything but. It's one of the things that's made working with couples all these years such a joy, is you do see a lot of relational healing. And that's part of what we want. Another thing before we get too far down the road, you'd asked, and I don't think I gave you a good answer yet on benefits and risks. And I do think that there are some risks with this. Obviously, we can't guarantee somebody that their relationship is going to make it, that they're going to heal during the process, and we do disclose all of that on the front end with people, just to say we're not giving you a relationship guarantee here. But what we do know is that the process, the benefits are you've got a safe place to deal with all the baggage and all of the secrets. Obviously, the risk, I often use a surgery analogy. Whenever you do surgery, you're going to open up a wound, you're going to cut out an infection, and then you're going to have to let that heal. And so that's very much like the disclosure. We do all the preparation, make it as safe as we can, and yet there is still going to be some, some post-op bleeding at times. There are going to be times when, people will struggle afterwards. And that really is where
I was going to say, isn't that where you're building in the empathy then?
Yes. That's exactly what I was about to say, was your empathy question would be perfect right there. Because it's a key part of this, because especially at the disclosure session and in the aftermath of the disclosure, we do a lot of work teaching empathy in that process to the person who's sharing their disclosure. If they go in and if in their disclosure statement, they are being defensive or they are justifying things, it shows they have no empathy, no connection to what the partner's experience is. And so we build that into the actual presentation of the disclosure itself. It's critically important right after that statement is shared, because then the partner's going to ask questions. They're going to respond with their reactions, their emotions, and how the person who has been the betrayer responds to the betrayed partner in that moment is critical. If they can respond empathically and they can maintain empathy and relational compassion and really communicate that they get what the partner has gone through, that's when they're more likely to really facilitate relational healing. So building that empathy in is critical. And early on in our profession, that just wasn't even considered. The word empathy was barely used. And it's something today that we consider a key part of the preparation for doing a therapeutic disclosure.
I mean, I can understand that you would build it into the disclosure, but I would think that in your ongoing therapy that you've got to continue to talk about empathy, because years down the road, I may not realize that some of the behaviors that I'm doing may be re-triggering or triggering, maybe not is not the right re-triggering, but triggering, setting off those internal feelings that the betrayed partner has that, start that kind of process all over again. So it doesn't feel like it's a one-off. We don't do empathy one time in the therapeutic disclosure and we're done with this. Okay, now you've heard all the things I did and I'm empathetic to how you feel, but I would think that you've got to keep helping them through that process over time.
Absolutely. And what I have found, particularly with men who struggle with problematic sexual behavior, empathy does not come naturally to many of them. Mm-hmm. And it is something we teach, we work on it, we practice it. In fact, a couple of years ago, I found us having to address it at the very first session they would come in. We just created a one-day workshop called Empathy and Relational Compassion for Men. And we bring guys we work with in and spend a whole day doing nothing but teaching and practicing empathy skills. And then what we find is if they want to learn it, they get it. And that probably has made the biggest difference in when we get feedback from the partners after the men go through that, they really see a change in things at that point.
Richard, if I am watching this and I'm someone who's part of a betrayed partnership, how soon should I expect a therapeutic disclosure to happen?
Sooner rather than later. I realize that doesn't give you a timestamp. The reason I say sooner rather than later is historically the sex addiction industry has made everything revolve around the addict. And what they do is they will tell the partner, you just have to wait till he or she is ready. And we find that sometimes that could be 2-3 years down the road. And by that point, the devastation is so great that the relationship typically isn't going to survive it. And there are some things that we know how to do now that have leveled the playing field, so to speak. And it's very important that partners expect it early in the process. And I'm not saying that they need to have that within a week, but I have prepared people for therapeutic disclosure in as little as 2 weeks. Now, that is not the norm, but it has been done. I would say it typically happens in a 6 to 8 week time span with proper training. And some of it comes down to what the partner is ready for. Many times partners want it to go slower. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to typically do it in the first 6 weeks after the discovery because the crisis, the chaos, the trauma is just too great, and people are having a hard time sorting through anything. But very early in the process, we try to get that going, at least get the preparation going.
You mentioned about the sex addiction field and the way things have been. And I think one of the things I'm really grateful for is that this is an evolving field and we've really made a lot of advances over time. And so, things that we would have done historically 20 years ago are so different now. And that's why I think therapeutic disclosure is really important for a relationship. I think it's important for us to talk about who's in a therapeutic disclosure. So who could I expect to be there in that process? So obviously it's the two partners. Who else is there?
There's several ways this can be done. The people you want in ideally are obviously the two partners, and then each partner's therapist should be in there. On occasion, we have had, two individual therapists preparing a disclosure, and then maybe a couples therapist was involved at some point. But we also find that it should take place ideally in the partner's therapist office. And that's because of the way we structure things. It's very much designed to empower the partner and to give them some choices back that may have been taken away from them. Mm-hmm. And so, ideally you want at least two. I realize that can be expensive for people. I have done it just myself in some cases, but I can tell you from a quality standpoint, it is much better to have two therapists who are trained in disclosure to do this. And I also have said for years, not every therapist even needs to be doing disclosures. There's a lot of fantastic therapists out there, but maybe this isn't their thing. And so that's why we have disclosure intensives that people can go do. And I know it's real common for us to have people fly in from all over the country just to do a 3-day disclosure process with us. And, I don't try to pressure therapists to do something that they don't want to do. And you may have a great therapist who's well trained in this area, but they just it's a lot of intense work, and not every therapist out there even wants to do these.
Yeah, I can imagine that just feeling drained after having done one of these sessions with a couple. Oh, yeah. I've heard some things about Polygraph being involved in disclosures. Can you address that a little bit, and what's the practice around Polygraph?
That's one of the many things that has changed in the field over the years. I know when I first got into this field 25 years ago, polygraphs were just considered bad news. Our leaders, our founders of this field, discouraged them. They taught adamantly against them. And as a result, we did not use them very widely. That has changed. And we have now gotten to where we know more about a polygraph. The technology with polygraphs has evolved tremendously, particularly in a digital age. And so we regularly do polygraphs as a part of therapeutic disclosures. It's not a mandatory thing, at least with me. Now, there are some out there who do disclosures who refuse to conduct one without a polygraph. I very much put that on the partner and give the betrayed partner a choice. So many choices have been taken away in the betrayal that, I really am trying to empower them with as many choices as they can. Almost all of them do choose to include a polygraph. Mm-hmm. But, it's something I want them to choose. I want it to be something that they want their partner to go through. And that, quite frankly, is one of the things that helps us facilitate these sooner rather than later is, if someone knows they're going to be taking that polygraph, they have to get the truth out a little bit earlier.
Right. So if I'm watching this and I am the betrayed and I'm wondering, what do I do now? What's the next step for me? What should I be doing?
Reaching out for your own personal care is the critical piece. It's critically important to find a therapist who understands what betrayal trauma is and is going to work from that as a model. We've had therapists out there who kept the co-addict codependency approach and just changed the language, and that ended up doing more harm than good in many cases. So really finding someone who understands the betrayal concept and that it is a traumatic event and that understands the need for a full therapeutic disclosure, even if that therapist isn't the one to facilitate it. And understanding things like the role of the polygraph. And, we have to, and look at Hollywood's expectations of that, which are very different from reality. And so questions like that of what can you expect from a polygraph? What's realistic? What's not? You'll want to be seeking help from someone who honors your wounds and is willing to provide the care for you and not just for the person who has done the betraying. One of the things that I think has made us unique at Capstone is we value the recovery and the healing of the partner as much as we do the person with the problematic sexual behavior. We value the children's healing just as much as we value the person with the problematic sexual behavior. And our old models really didn't do that. And that's one of the things we really emphasize. You want someone who's going to listen to you, give you a voice, and value you just as much as the care of the person who has betrayed you.
Well, Richard, I just want to thank you so much for spending time with us today and talking about disclosure, therapeutic disclosure, and giving us some guidance. Obviously, this is not a training session for a therapist, and we would never want it to purport to be one. Somebody that is interested in getting that kind of training needs to go to a specialized training for it. Now, I know that you do some of those, and people can find those at Capstone, right?
Yes, capstoneatlanta.com under our professional training sections. We try to schedule a couple of those every year, and they are done all online.
Okay, great. Well, just thank you so much for spending time with me. I know that this will be helpful for a lot of the folks that come to our YouTube channel, and I really appreciate you just spending time letting us know what it's all about.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here, and if I can provide help or resources in any way, my email is richard@capstoneatlanta.com. Our phone number is 770-744-5055. And the website is capstoneatlanta.com. And we'll do whatever we can to help or to try to find you help throughout the country.
And of course, if you can't reach Richard or you know, that just isn't working for you, you can always go to the SASH website or call us here at SASH, and we're more than willing to give you resources. So be sure to do that.
Check out sash.net.
Sash.net. Yes. Well, thanks again, Richard, and we'll see you very soon.
Thanks for having me, Leah.